InSpanning Gateway, I'm Asia, and I just went over connection. If you didn't see it, you might want to take a look at that. But connection is very important, and especially when it comes to foundation, okay? Because if you're not connected mentally, physically, or spiritually to your foundation, then it's likely that you won't have a stable one. Okay, that's just a way of naturally observing that, coming to our own conclusions, right? So, when it comes to connection, this is a great way of connecting to foundation because there's many different forms of foundation. I show the star map as a representation of foundation, but we also have individual foundation. We can also represent that energy. If I can reach it. Represent foundational energy through the base chakra, okay? That has to do with moon energies, fire energies, earth energies, air energies, water. It's a combination of all, right? When you're building a foundation, you need to have be able to build within with the elements, okay? And the more you are aware of the elements, the better off of a foundation you will build. But when it comes to the fourth house, which hopefully you are familiar with astrology, but it represents the home. It's the place of settlement, okay? It's a place you first have to be settled, right, in order to build. It represents the roots, the bloodline, the lineage, okay? This is why foundation is very important because it is upon which you build. So the fourth house deals, right, is governed by the moon. It's governed by the spirit, right, the spiritual aspect of things because things happen in the spirit before they manifest into physicality, right? So, which is also represented as the upbringing, the family, okay? These things are necessary in order to build individually and as far as a community outside of ourselves, right? And these are the elements that we use in order to do these things. So when a lot of us aren't really able to build much, because it has to do with the lineage, okay, which also represents the fourth house, the generational traumas or karmas, okay, but based off of foundational principles in the upbringing. And these are things that we can identify within ourselves individually and through our family structures. All of the things that weren't necessarily healthy in building up families and sense of communities and cultures and everything else. These are the principles on which culture and family were built. But if you're not connected to its natural elements, its operations on what family and culture is, then you're going to be disconnected from the source of things and connected to something else. And that can be done mentally, informationally. Just not having the information on something is a blockage, a barrier to possibilities on what things could be. So, just as much as a belief system can be a container, a way of blocking out other information, a barrier, a boundary around other information that is up to you to decide if it should be blocked out. Nobody else. Like, nobody should be able to govern your mind. That's your job. That's our jobs, to govern our minds. Also with the moon, the intuition, the spiritual ability to see, to use the mind. And this is how our minds and our behaviors and our habits are built. It's through foundational principles and foundational upbringing, right? Upbringing, building. So, also the fourth house deals with the emotions, right? That's part of the spirit, the unseen. So, these are the foundational principles on which those elements should be built in order to receive a desired outcome, right? But it comes a point in time where if we weren't given, raised with, shown foundational principles, at some point in time we still have to take responsibility for ourselves, because this is an individual journey. Nobody comes with you and nobody leaves with you. That is something we each do for ourselves, and we witness this through life every day, when people transition, when people are birthed, when beings are birthed. There's all type of births. The seasons are a representation of birth. The east, spring, they all go together because they are laws of operation, principles, ways of building, continuing on in time. And there's also ways of destruction, stopping time, stopping existence, right? Because there are many forms of death. Death has many reasons, meanings, and possibilities. It's just the ending to a form. There's many different forms. And if you're not aware of the many different forms and the many different life cycles of birth and death, then you're very limited in your perspective on life, because you're not connected to these things. And these things can be used against you in this life. Foundation, very important, just like having a foundational connection to information, but for us individually. How else are you supposed to build, right? We should know that. But if we are building our spiritual existence on material things, there's not much time, we should understand, that's represented in those forms physically. But if we are spirit, we understand that spirit is everlasting, right? Just right? So we should be building upon spiritual principles. And then those things will manifest into physicality, physical form, by the use of these elements. So it's up to us as individuals to know our foundation, right? To be able to perceive it, to look at its many forms and how it's come into being in our lives, and how those things have an effect on our lives today, because we are in the present moment. It's best to only use history, your story, to help you to make better decisions for today, because that's all we really have is today. Today is everlasting, because it's a spiritual thing. The day doesn't end just because you see it that way. The day just continues on. Just because you decide to go to sleep and wake up and think it's a different day doesn't mean that it necessarily is. But it also is another day, because you can perceive it. You can use that level of separation. We have to be able to perceive things from many different angles in order to get a better perception of spirit, of truth. Truth is important to spiritual foundation. It is in which longer lasting forms are built upon, right? Because if you want to form a relationship with someone, what is a principle to build that relationship on? Truth, honesty, fairness, compassion. These are foundational principles that we should be able to identify for ourselves in order to build, unless you want to use the negative aspect of those to destroy. A lot of us use positive and negative aspects unknowingly, because a lot of us don't understand exactly what we're doing, and a lot of us do. But this is a way of identifying these things and relating it to the spiritual nature, because it's in ways that I think most people would want to build and take responsibility. You know, no one man can save the world, but you can save your world, right? That's up to each individual to save our world and to contribute to the world outside of it. And that's through our foundation, how we build, how we are built. How we've healed, build, healed. Healing is a form of building. Healing is what we can take individual responsibility for ourselves and our foundation and our family and our community. But that has to be a personal responsibility. It's funny, symbolically, we see the 5 represents connection. So the 4 is an individual connection. With the 1 and the V. And then the 5 expresses the individual connection. It's the expression of the connection from the individual. Just another way to see things intuitively. The connection of information and the truth amongst these things. Foundation also represents the feminine, because this is a very important aspect in which to build. And then we should be able to look at all the ways that the feminine is disrespected. We can look at life and all the relationships in our lives, especially when it deals with feminine energy, and see if those are the most healthiest ways to build.